So I increased my squat this week by 15 kilos, almost by accident. And I thought I'd just share how I did it and why I think it worked. So it's an increase of 14%. And I've been on a serious plateau for most of the year. So it was really unexpected. And it was due to something a little bit off that I did. Basically, I was working out and I loaded the bar. I did a whole lot of field sets. I did my regular warm up, which is very, very lightweights and so sort of a few sets of 10 reps with just the bar, then putting on 5 kilos aside, then 10 kilos aside, and slowly working up until I was doing heavy singles. And what I normally do, firstly, the jump, just to be specific, so you know what I'm talking about, was from a max of 105 kilos to 120 kilos in the space of a week. And the reason that I was quite surprised is that I normally just do very small progressions. So I do progressively overload. But I don't really go for big jumps like a lot of people do, maybe because I've been lifting for a while and it's harder. Maybe I'm a ninny, I don't know. But pretty much I started the year with a 90 kilo max squat. And what I normally do is I will lift the same amount I'll do sets, like a top set of 1. Then I'll drop the weight by 10 kilos and I'll do 2 sets of 3. Then I'll drop the weight by 10 kilos and I'll do 5 sets of 5. And the way that I normally progress is extremely slow. So I will try progress on something and increase my baseline. So for example, increase the 5x5 by 5 kilos. Or even less if I've got smaller increments available. It depends what gym you're in. Whether they've got, those teeny weeny little plates, or if, the smallest you can get is 2.5. And only every 5 sessions or something. Now, I only squat heavyweight once a week. I do other accessory exercises if I have an extra day, but that's not always the case. It just depends on time. Life gets in the way. But I'm very, very, very consistent. And so I make these tiny, tiny, tiny little progressions, and I'll often go 4 weeks without increasing my top set. And I track this on a spreadsheet. So I'm very, very methodical and very consistent. And I was going 90, then, a few weeks later, 95. And then a few weeks later, 105, and then back down to 95. Then I tore my calf. As I said, life gets in the way. So I had to it was at least 6 weeks off. It might have even been 2 months. I can't remember. But I had to start again pretty much back where I started at the beginning of the year. And that was in April. And then, so I was making this very, very slow, painfully slow progress on my squats. And I've been really trying to hit full depth because eventually, maybe a year from now, depending on how life goes, I would love to do a powerlifting competition and not really necessarily win my category of old folks, but I would like to not make a complete clown of myself. And I was a little bit bummed because I was deadlifting 120 kilos with no problem, my only limiting factor being grip. And I just couldn't seem to get there on squats. And then what happened is I went to the gym. This was on Tuesday, so today's Friday. Went to the gym. It was a hotel gym. I was working in Tanzania. It was nice and warm, but I was really not feeling that strong. But I thought, you know what, I've hit 105 4 times in a row, 4 weeks in a row. I'm going to just hit 105 again. And I'll rather try to increase my strength on my base lift, my 5x5. And then when that got stronger, do the 2x3. And then when that got stronger, then finally try go higher than 105 to full depth. And then I wasn't paying attention like I should have been. I was paying a lot of attention to my breathing. I was paying a lot of attention to my brace, to my knee position, all the cues that you normally do. But I was distracted by something that the trainer was doing and somebody else in the gym. And I didn't count the plates properly. So normally I'll put 80 kilos in plates, add the 20 kilos to the bar, and then I take these 2.5 kilo little plates and stick one on the end of each side of the bar, and that's the 105 kilos. And I think because I was distracted, I didn't count the bar. So what happened was I tried to push what I thought was 100 kilos. I hadn't put those little 2.5 kilo plates on yet. And I put so I didn't count the weight of the bar. I put what I thought was 100 kilos. And I lifted, and it was incredibly heavy. And I couldn't get full depth. And I didn't want to be stupid, even though there was a trainer there to try and help me. And there are safety bars. I have in the past done stupid things, so I'm trying not to do stupid things. So I didn't go full depth. I couldn't get down there because I was worried I wouldn't be able to get back up. Anyway, I sat there for a few minutes, feeling sorry for myself. And then when I felt a little bit more rested, I decided I'm going to give it one more bash. And if I can't do it, then I will, call it a day. I don't know, just go lift lighter, and it is what it is. Anyway, so again, I go up to what I think is 100 kilos, and everything just went right. Form was perfect, and I went down, squatted full depth, and I pushed that weight back up. And if I tell you, it was the hardest rep I've ever done of anything in my life. And I finished it, and I still thought it was 100 kilos. So I sat down, I was all, miffed about it. Now I've got, along with my spreadsheets, I've got a last column in my spreadsheet where I track my progression. And it started out as just simple comments, but it's become like a little diary. And I try and analyze what went right or what went wrong. In this case, what went wrong, and I'm looking at how much sleep I got because I track my sleep. What I ate, did I eat enough carbs? And I came up with all these excuses in my head of, well, I didn't have a great night's sleep 2 nights before, and maybe I didn't eat any carbs for breakfast, so maybe that affected it. And I try to pick out all these little factors as to why I hadn't been able to hit 105, why 100 was the max. And then I started to take the plates off, and I realized that I hadn't counted the bar, and I'd actually just done 120 kilos. And it was quite an interesting experience. I mean, quite funny, even though it's a bit idiotic. And I did feel like a bit of a schmuck, but it was quite a crazy experience because I was trying to understand why was I able to lift it 14% more than I've ever done before. And if you're really strong, that's probably not a lot for you. If you're really weak, maybe that's more than you could even imagine lifting. We're all different sizes, different body types and whatever. But for me, it was a lot. And I was trying to sit and analyze like what actually, as funny as my stupidity was there, something went very right. And I like to sit and think about why it went very right, because if I understand the mechanism behind it, then maybe I can actually use that to get stronger, not just on my squat, but on everything. So I came to a few conclusions. So it's flipping freezing here. I'm in Joburg, and I came back from Tanzania where I was sweating like a pig, and I came back to Joburg, and it's absolutely freezing. Anyway, so I was trying to think what could I take from this lesson. Now I'm going to be honest, I don't think next week I'm going to be able to squat 120 kilos. that was incredibly, incredibly hard for me. But what are the lessons here? The first lesson, I think, is that our minds limit us. Okay, because in my head, I thought I could only squat 105. I was squatting 105, and it turned out my body could do more. Now, I don't advocate pushing yourself to the point where you're going to injure yourself. So, would I have done that? Would I do that again? Yes. Would I try? Would I try to do it on a squat rack without safety bars? Definitely not. Because I think if you are trying to lift vastly more than what you have ever done before, you have to have safety as a primary consideration. I do think that once you're lifting what in my case was 1.5 times my body weight over, your neck, it's just not clever to do it without safety bars. And the reason I mention this is because I do work out a lot of the time at home, and a lot of my videos are of my garage gym. And if you're working out at home and you're on a flimsy little squat rack and you don't have safety bars, I don't recommend suddenly lifting drastically more than what you normally do. But if you're in a safe environment, you've got safety bars, you've got someone there that can help you, it's interesting to see how far you can actually push yourself. And I'm not saying do that every time, because I don't think that's a clever way to progress. And I think it is a good way to get injured. But now and again, it really is worthwhile to just see what you're made of and see how hard you can push. Because in my case, definitely, it turns out that it was a limiting factor in my mind. I think that was one factor, but it wasn't the most important factor in this progression. And I think that the most important factor was consistency, because when I looked back over the year, when I was looking on my spreadsheet, with the exception of the time I spent off with my calf injury, I was relentlessly persistent. So we're in August now, and I do not miss weeks where I squat. I somehow always manage to make a plan to get to a squat rack. So I think consistency is the most important factor there. And I'm going to credit consistency primarily with having broken that barrier. And I think that this video is mainly because of frustration on my part, because as obsessed as I am with strength training, I do hit plateaus, and I hit them for a long time. I watch a lot of these fitness influencers talking about getting stronger every week. And, I just think to myself, like, there is a point. If you're just an average Joe, I'm not talking about professional powerlifters, I guess maybe bodybuilders on steroids, that sort of thing. I don't know anything about that because I'm not on steroids and I am not a professional powerlifter. But for an average Joe like me, I do hit plateaus, and I hit them for a long time. And it can be frustrating. So I do get quite excited when I make a big jump like this, and I want to learn how to do it more. And then just to finish off, there's a philosophy that I'm going to call it a framework. And none of it's original individually, but I came up with a framework that I called SPICE. And SPICE basically breaks down how to progress in the gym. The first one is specificity. I don't think now, when I tore my calf, I did do leg extensions, seated leg extensions. I was able to do that after about 3 weeks, and I did it the whole way through my recovery with very light weights. So that could have helped with consistency. But the main thing with strength progression is specificity. Not the main thing, but the first thing. I don't think you're going to get stronger at squats, for example, if you are just doing leg extensions. You need to be doing squats. It's more than just muscular. It's more than just hypertrophy. Your whole nervous system needs to work together, and all the supporting musculature needs to work together. Your bones even need to adjust to the load. So specificity matters a lot, and progressive overload matters a lot. I don't think you can increase your strength if you don't slowly over time progressively overload your weights. And then intensity matters, okay? Because at the end of the day, if every single set you do is light, I think that's fantastic. As long as you're going to the gym, you're getting healthy, that's fantastic. And over time, if you're consistent, what used to feel heavy will feel light. But at the same time, I think that if you want to progress, you do need a level of intensity. You need to do a certain percentage of your work at an intensity where you are close to failure. And then the next thing, which I've mentioned again, but I'm mentioning it here because of what I'm calling my SPICE framework, is consistency. The C is consistency. If you don't go do that specific exercise consistently over time, don't see how you're going to make I don't see how you're going to progress in the long term. And then the last thing is just efficiency, because when you're lifting, especially heavy weight, it can take a bit of time between sets to recover. I'm an old fart, and it takes me a while to recover if I do a heavy set. But if you do your workout efficiently, you have a plan, you're not sort of just wondering what you're going to do. You go in with a plan, you take notes, and you execute that plan efficiently. I think eventually the combination of specificity, progressive overload, intensity, consistency, and efficiency will get you to become stronger. That is my theory of how I suddenly made this big progress. And I hope you make progress with your lifts. And I hope that this video wasn't as boring as I think it was. So enjoy your training.